Show is yours, Scott.
Thanks, Christopher. Welcome, guys. Welcome to my kitchen. I'm up in Whale Beach. And look, I've been doing a few of these and increasingly so, obviously, because of COVID. A lot of the lives that I've been doing on Facebook, I always preface it by saying it's a difficult time at the moment. It's tricky times, both emotionally, financially. So if you are struggling, my sort of virtual clinic door is always open, and if I can help in the way that I can through nutrition or exercise or optimizing sleep or health, then reach out, email me, buzz me on Instagram or Facebook or whatever, and if I can help, I will. So I just wanted to get that out the way. So guys, this is Women's Health Week. I'm incredibly excited to be a part of it, so thanks to the guys at Juanita Nielsen Center for inviting me to be a part of that. A little bit about me. I'm a health coach. I'm a holistic nutrition and performance coach. I have an exercise science background. I was a PT for many years. I'm a sports nutritionist. So I'm very passionate about this space, and I've operated in this space since 2005. To begin with, it was very much exercise driven. That was my focus then, as it probably was personally as well. I thought that sort of exercise, and if you train really hard, you can be as fit and as healthy as you could be. But I've sort of gone on this arc and this evolution through education, and I've got to the point where now fitness is a component of it, but it's certainly not the pinnacle or the biggest driver, shall we say, for health and well-being. It's actually nutrition and sleep. So I just want to sort of frame this whole cooking workshop, because it is a cooking workshop. We're here to learn how to cook delicious food. But if we frame it in a way that is easy to digest, excuse the pun, and that is that our body is constantly striving for homeostasis, which is, when everything's working in harmony. And when that's the case, we do have fluctuations in hormones. That's all very normal. I've got the gardener watering the garden. And so we do have an ebb and a flow of hormones. And those hormones dictate a certain operating system, whether that's during the day, during the early evening, when we're entering into rest or segueing into sleep. It's when that ebb and flow of our hormones, or frame it, ebb and flow of your physiology, all very normal, all very natural. When that becomes dysregulated, you've got big surges, big dumps, then that's when sort of cracks can appear in our health and well-being. So what are the major drivers for those big undulations of our hormones, or those big undulations of our physiology? Well, we've got a lack of sunlight, we've got poor sleep, we've got processed food, we've got a sedentary lifestyle, we've got toxins, things in our environment, we've got stress. And there's some of those factors or those aspects to our lifestyle that are harder to manage and control. So it's harder to manage and control the stress, the emails that we receive from our boss or our colleagues. It's harder to control or manage how our family speaks to us, or any sort of way that stress might be driven. But there's some of those factors that I described that are easier to control. You have full sovereignty over nutrition, sleep, and movement. And it just so happens, apropos what I was saying earlier, that sleep and nutrition happen to be the biggest drivers for health and well-being. So let's assume that you're sleeping like a baby. Let's have a look at nutrition. How do we go from pantry fridge to living a really healthy and resilient life? Well, before you get into superfoods, before you get into the minutiae of nutrition, a really easy way to view the whole thing is, if you're having largely or predominantly natural and unprocessed foods, then you're way ahead of the game. Because we're not affecting our brain-gut relationship dramatically if it's all natural and unprocessed. We're not having huge swings in our physiology, in our hormones, if it's natural and unprocessed. So it's not to say that you can't have things that don't fall into that bracket. But if most of the things we're eating over the longest period of time, i.e. consistently, do fall into that bracket, natural, unprocessed, unrefined, then we're giving your physiology the right inputs or the right information, and that information comes in nutrients, vitamins, and minerals. So see your body as a bubbling, complex cauldron, if you like, of biochemistry. It needs certain inputs, it needs certain information to perform optimally, whether that's energetically or in a motor sense or cognitively or immunity or resilience. It needs that information. So if our diet is a vast array of natural and unprocessed foods, i.e. we're not getting our nutrients and our calories from corn, sugar and wheat, it's diverse, it's broad, then we're setting ourselves up for health. We're setting ourselves up for success because we're inputting a broad array of information in the form of nutrients, vitamins and minerals. So I hope that makes sense. I think we can get lost in what it is to be healthy, but if you boil it down to working with your physiology, yes, there's undulations throughout the course of the day within that 24-hour period, within that biological circadian rhythm. That's all very normal, it's all very natural. If we can build in a lifestyle and a diet that complements that, that allows that, facilitates that, and avoids big spikes, big sugar crashes, sugar highs, poor sleep, so elevated cortisol. If we can help to sort of normalize and stay within the parameters of homeostasis, which is the body's desire to stay within a healthy range, that's when we're going to set ourselves up for success. Okay, to the cooking. I want to run through 3 recipes. One is a quick and go smoothie. Again, nothing's out the box here. We're not talking superfoods. We're not being a chef. It's something that you and I can both do in our own kitchen with food that we can access from, Woolies or Coles. There's nothing too out the box here. It's all natural. It's all unprocessed, and it's bloody tasty. And that's the thing. That is the all important thing. There's no sense in eating food because you know that it's healthy. Kale is a great example of this. I don't think kale tastes all that great. And I'm sure you have, if it's not kale for you, it might be a carrot. They don't set our world on fire, but there's a way that you can treat that carrot or treat that kale and complement it with other foods that all of a sudden it does set your world up on fire. And if you can do that, if you can get to that point where the food is alluring, attractive, exciting, sexy almost, then you're more inclined to gravitate to that dish or that food or those foods or those recipes or that attitude to food. And so is your loved ones, so is your family. And then you elevate everyone's health and well-being. So let's look at this smoothie recipe first. I just want to preface this, that no recipe, especially mine, are set in stone. Think about more about the framework or the philosophy around these dishes rather than the specifics of measurements, exact ingredients. Think about it as a holistic approach rather than the specifics. Because when we get into the specifics and we try and mimic someone else's diet, that's when it's going to sort of derail or unravel. So if someone understands the premise or the framework from which to build a healthy lifestyle, then it can become uniquely yours, and you're not having to look over someone's shoulder or read too many books, unless they're my books. If they're my books, please go out and read them. They're great, but you know what I mean. Like, I think knowledge is the key, and if you can absorb as much information through podcasts, reading, YouTube, lectures, all that sort of stuff, then you then are the sovereignty of your, you know, you're at the driving wheel. You're in control of your own race or your own master plan. Anyway, I digress. I've probably had too much coffee. I hope you have one close to hand. Okay, so a smoothie, and there's no sort of, as I said, there's no explicit rules with smoothies. It's just a way to get a nutrient-rich dish quick and easy, and it has applications and utility if you have a family. I've got 3 kids. The youngest is 2, she's probably, well, she's 7 months, so she's getting to the point where she'll be able to have smoothies. But the other 2 boys, the older boys, it's a great way to get in a bunch of veggies or some ingredients that they probably wouldn't have if it's on its own in front of them in a bowl or a dish. So let's look at what could be a typical smoothie. So first of all, ice. So you'll need sort of 4 or 5 ice cubes. Any more, it sort of tends to turn into a bit of a frappe, which is totally fine. Horses for courses. Milk. Obviously, milk comes down to your preference. I've got some cow's milk here. Really quick one on milk. Because I'm sure you've heard it's unhealthy for you, it's good for you. You know, I'm 45, so I grew up on, you know, if you don't have milk, you know, your bones are going to crumble. You know, you have to have milk. And then sort of probably 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it got a bit of a pushback. The stance on it currently is, if you have a sensitivity to casein or lactose, or a pre-existing inflammatory conditions like an autoimmune, then dairy as a family can be pro-inflammatory. So maybe sort of sideline it or remove it for 30 days and see what happens. On the other hand, if you don't have a sensitivity or intolerance to casein or lactose, or a pre-existing inflammatory condition, then it can be anti-inflammatory. So it's understanding where your starting point is and whether dairy is a healthful addition to the diet or not. So I didn't have dairy for about 10 years based on the sort of conventional wisdom at the time, but now there's a nuance in there, so that might be worth exploring. So milk, obviously of your choice, nut milk, dairy if you please. I'm going to base all my meals, not just today, but for the rest of my days, on protein, and I'll get to this in a second. But protein and fat, or maybe I'll get to it now. Protein or fat has a structural and a functional role in our body, so we need both, and we need to hit a certain threshold of both those macronutrients. And if we don't hit that threshold, there's sort of cracks appear in our physiology, in our health and our resilience, because they are the building blocks. They're integral to all physiology and cellular work. The third and other macronutrient is carbohydrates. It doesn't have, broadly speaking, that structural or functional role in our body that fat and protein does. So treat it like an energy source. So rather than keto or low carb, moderate carb, high carb, you can kind of do away with that and see it as, okay, it's an energy source. So does my output, i.e. my training volume or intensity, require me to have carbohydrates? And it's a slider, it's a sliding scale. So obviously set your protein to a certain level, set your fat, and I reckon maybe 30% minimum to hit that physiological requirement, and then the rest is carbohydrates. And you can slide that figure or that value up and down according to your energy output. So this is so prioritize protein with all your dishes. So I've got some protein powder here. I don't have an affiliation with either. I'm actually going through a bunch of different brands at the moment, just to trial to see which one I do prefer. So I've got a generous serve of protein powder there. I've also got creatine. So I've got about 5 grams of that, something I have every day, and I'm sure you've heard of creatine. It does have utility in performance and recovery, but our neurons in our brain feed off or metabolize creatine for energy. So it's been shown to improve memory and recall. And so it can be a supplement that you do every day. 5 grams is plenty. And obviously it has the utility in the performance sense too. So we've got protein, creatine, the milk, we've got some peanut butter. Can be a nut butter of your choice. So we've got some fats in there, we've got some protein, we've got some pepitas, obviously more fat, bit of fiber. We got a banana, so a banana is great for mouth feel and texture in a smoothie. Obviously, going back to apropos my point about carbohydrates, I've just trained. I trained about an hour and a half ago. So I'm happy and content to put that whole banana in because my cells are ready and willing to accept sugar, sorry. If I hadn't trained this morning, I might not have the banana, or I might have a quarter of a banana. But, you know, we're tailoring this to the specific individual, so you need to work out where you are on that slider at any given time or any given day. And some spinach, some loose leaf spinach, that goes in. And this is really important when we're going back to fueling our kids from a calorie perspective and a nutrient perspective. It's a great way to shove some veggies in there without them knowing. You know, they're not going to taste that vegetable, be it any cruciferous veggie or tomato even, or anything of that nature. They're not going to taste it because it's going to be masked with the other stronger flavorings that are in that smoothie, i.e. the protein powder and the peanut butter. So it's a great way to jam some veggies in there. And I think that's about it. So excuse the noise for 10 seconds. And sort of further to that point about jamming nutrients in, of course you can add some nutrient-rich, superfoods if you like, some chia seeds, flax seeds, some bee pollen, hemp seeds, things of that nature. But it can be pretty simple. It doesn't have to be expensive, but it can be tasty. And if we prioritize the protein and make sure we're getting sufficient fat within it, then we can add some other carbs in the form of spinach or more sort of high index carbs like banana. But try and avoid, if I don't want to go down this rabbit hole too much about carbs versus non-carbs, but treat carbs like frame carbs like an energy source and treat it like a carb appropriate diet. So if I'm training and I require carbohydrates, and look, we're all friends here, so if you need help with this sort of thing, it's the sort of thing that I do. So I can work out your calorie requirements and the breakdown on a macronutrient level. But anyway, that's for another time. All right. As Christophe would say, bon appetit. How is that for an accent, Christophe?
Looks delicious, authentic, love it. But
thanks, Matt.
Question here. Can we have access to some of the recipes that we'll be putting together today, please, Scott?
In short, yeah. I haven't sort of... one of these are on my website, so scottgoodinproject.com.
Great.
There's probably about 30 recipes in that PDF that Christophe mentioned at the top of the session, so you can have access to that. There's 100 and close to 200 recipes on my website, so if it's not this one specifically, just email me, or there's 200 that you can access easily.
Perfect, thank you.
No worries. Okay, so the 3 recipes, we're sort of going through the arc of the day. So a smoothie might be something that you have, you know, you're heading out the door, you've done your workout, you've gone for your run, and it's something that you knock back before you jump in the car and go to work, although not many of us are doing that at the moment. So the next dish is a salad. Now, going back to what I was saying about some natural foods being a bit bland, a bit tasteless when compared to, you know, some processed foods like donuts and hot dogs and all that type of stuff. So we have to treat it with a bit of love. Just like you would a steak, you know, you apply, you know, the right amount of heat to the steak, the right amount of rest time, the right amount of butter at the end, and salt and pepper and a bit of lemon maybe, because you've positioned that steak as the hero of the dish. The same attitude should be translated to veggies. Don't treat veggies as just like the thing on the side that you should be eating to be healthy. If we treat them with the love and the respect that we do the steak or the chicken breast, those then become almost the hero in themselves, and get less of the sort of push to the side of the plate. And they can, because we can eat those types of veggies, the above ground veggies, the cruciferous veggies, spinach, kale, cabbage, all that, all the green, beautiful stuff. We can kind of eat that ad libitum. But to do that, we have to make it taste good. And so you can do that by treating it to heat, dressing it or cooking it in fat, definitely seasoning, squeeze of lemon, some lime, some chili, or a salsa or a dressing or an emulsion. And you don't have to be too chefy about this, but I think it's really, it's almost like a key into getting more nutrients and more veggies into our diet. Depending who you're listening to, depending what sort of health resource you're sort of relying on, some people say we need to have 4 cups of veggies, 5 cups of veggies, 9 cups of veggies, some people. And look, I think if we're aiming for around, you know, probably 5 or 6, we're down the path on the way to health and well-being. But in order to do that, we may as well make it bloody tasty and delicious. And that smoothie is one way to get a cup or 2, even before you've sort of had time to think about it, particularly for your kids. If they're heading out to school, they've had 2 or 3 cups of veggies before they've sort of started their school day. So let's look at this salad. Again, no rules. So if you see something in this recipe that you don't like or you want to substitute, it's important to make it yours. Sounded very aggressive then, didn't I? Sorry. So we're going to make a base. Again, this is nothing tricked up. This is nothing out of the box. I'm, you know, full disclosure here. I'm not a chef. I'm a passionate cook, but I always get embarrassed if someone says that I'm a chef, particularly if there's a chef in the room, because I haven't trained, and that's probably becoming evident. But I spend a lot of time in the kitchen. I cook for myself and my family every day. It's my sort of downtime, if you like. It's when I relax and unwind. I don't find it stressful at all. I know some people do, but I feel like anything, if you devote enough time and energy to one thing, you're going to get good at it. You know, if you want to learn how to play guitar, then it requires some time and diligence and perseverance and patience to evolve that skill. Exactly the same thing in a cooking environment. The more time you spend, even if it's like one dish that you do again and again and again, at some point it becomes second nature. And at some point you're not looking down at a cookbook because you remember what's in it and you've tweaked it to make it your own, to make it really personal. And that might be adding more salt, more spice, less spice, more sour, whatever it is, as long as it's to your preference and to your like. So we're just going to start building a little base, and we've got some fermented cabbage here, and beetroot, and some sauerkraut. So if you want to elevate your health in a really easy and reasonably affordable way, there's this great study that's come out of late where they compared high fiber diets to fermented food diets and in terms of its impact and potency on gut health, and then further down the track, your resilience and your ability to contend with inflammation. The fermented food outstripped the high fiber diet for those outcomes. So 2 to 5 serves being tablespoons, so 2 to 5 tablespoons a day of probiotic rich food, sauerkraut, kimchi, things of that nature. You set up your gut environment to be more anti-inflammatory. So you release certain anti-inflammatory cytokines and peptides to help lower systemic inflammation. So it's a very easy and reasonably affordable way to elevate your health and resilience. So I've just mixed those two together. Again, this is something, it's important to acknowledge that things should be easy. They shouldn't be tricky. You know, we're all pushed for time. We've all got family hanging around. It needs to be something you can do on the fly almost. To that, we're going to add some loose leaves. Again, substitute for anything that you have in the fridge or things that you really sort of lean towards naturally. And some lettuce leaves. So I'm just going to snap off maybe 4 or 5 of these. So when you're building a salad, think about flavour first and foremost, because even if it doesn't look great, as long as it tastes great. So flavour, colour and texture. So we've already got a bit of that going on. We are going to add some grated carrot. So we've got plenty of colour so far. Some jalapenos for a little kick of hit, a little hit of kick, I guess is the expression. A little bit of spice, a little bit of heat. And I've done 2 dressings, and now I was sort of conscious for time, so I've done them ahead of time. But basically, one's a tahini, so tahini that you buy in a supermarket aisle or health food store, and I've mixed that with water, lemon juice, parsley, garlic and salt. I'm going to put that on at the end. This other dressing that I did yesterday, and it's been in the fridge, so basically it's a slight evolution to a vinaigrette. So vinaigrette is typically red wine vinegar, olive oil, salt and pepper. Very simple, very basic in certain ratios. I've just elevated that, and I've gone a bit of ginger, a bit of garlic and a bit of chili. So, and a bit of honey, so something to balance it out. So 3 dry ingredients, 3 wet ingredients. So the dry being chili, garlic, ginger, and the wet being red wine vinegar. There's a bit of apple cider in there as well, olive oil and honey. So you remember me saying that we need to base all our meals, you probably can't see me over there, we need to base all our meals on protein. And I think once we start to do that, we will really sort of help to normalise our physiology, help to normalise our hormones, and in particular insulin. It'll also help to sort of curb cravings. I'll tell you what's happening on a physiological level with sugar very quickly, and protein for that matter. So we have neurons in our gut, just like we do have in our brain. And we have neurons that are exclusively looking out for sugar. And sugar in all its forms. So I'm talking about pizza bases, pasta, rice, Tim Tams, donuts. It all comes down the same. It all gets dumped out the end in one form or another of sugar. So that, don't worry about where it comes from for the time being. Just know that the pointy end, being the gut, it's identified as sugar. So when these neurons identify as sugar, it relays a message directly up the vagus nerve. Now the vagus nerve is an incredible piece of engineering. So it goes from our brain, and it's called vagus based on vagabond, so a wandering nerve. So this nerve taps into our lungs, our heart, and our digestion, as well as other places. So these neurons, they pick up sugar in all its derivatives, or all its sources, I should say, and it sends a message. And that message is one of pleasure and reward, and that triggers dopamine. And the triggering of dopamine is married by the triggering of pain. So in an isolated case, 1 unit of pleasure, of dopamine, is met with 1 unit of pain. And that pain comes in not, physical pain, but in the sense of craving. And so it leads you, it enables you to replace that pain by the thing that caused you pleasure. And that is the backbone, if you like, of addiction. And so many of us in the Western world are addicted to sugar, and it's no lack of willpower. It's not about greed. It's not about, oh, I just love sugar. It's actually this ancestral mechanism that was inbuilt in us hundreds of thousands of years that served us very well. But in 2021, when we've got sugar everywhere, it doesn't serve us all that well. It actually trips us up. So the way to mitigate that is to not have that next cookie. Obviously, that trips the whole system, and you can avoid that constant pain and the need to replace that pain. You can focus more on prioritizing fat or protein, and the neurons in our gut that identify protein and or fat relay a message, not triggering the dopamine, but tell our body that once we get to a certain threshold of omega-3s, being fatty acids or protein, to shut off the system, to put our knives and forks down. We're full, don't eat anymore, put the brakes on. And so we can get to a level of satiety and facilitating not overeating much easier than if we're eating carbohydrates and sugar, because that system actually enables and facilitates us to go back to the bowl time and time again. It's a bit of a trip system. So that's just a quick sort of dissection on the physiology or the map that certain macronutrients have within our body. So fat, protein really drives satiety, forcing us, there's actually a motor response to close your mouth and put your knife and fork down. With the sugar, it loops that dopamine system, and there's actually a motor response to grip your fork and open your mouth. It's quite amazing. So in there, we have lots of natural and unprocessed foods. We've got enough serving for the day of those probiotics. We've got some jalapenos, couple of lettuces, baby spinach, cos, grated carrots. We've got plenty of flavour in there. We've got plenty of colour. Well, I say plenty of flavour. If I was to serve that, albeit dressed, it would be okay. I wouldn't be sort of giving it 5 stars and rave reviews. But if we add those dressings that I was talking about, and there's nothing unhealthy, every element to that dressing, every ingredient of that dressing, garlic, ginger, chili, olive oil, vinegar, salt, pepper, has nutritional merit. And so why wouldn't you add it if it then transforms your dish into something delicious? So just get a spoon and we'll add some of that dressing. And look, ordinarily I probably wouldn't add both dressings, but I might today. So maybe 4 tablespoons, give it another toss. Okay, I'll just grab a bowl. And so going back to prioritising protein, it is a salad. We've got 2 or 3 cups, you know, probably more of natural and unprocessed foods, but we're prioritising protein. And that's really the important message here, or one of the important messages, is that we need to shift. Generally speaking, in the Western world, we need to shift where we're getting our calories from and our nutrients from. We've gone very high carbohydrate with the prevalence of sugar because it's tripping that dopamine system. So we need to break that. As I said, I probably wouldn't mix the 2 dressings, but, you know, why not?
Looks sensational there, Scott.
If only you were here, Christoph.
Please, please, making me hungry here.
Always season your food. I was on a cooking show many years ago, and I got pulled over the coals many times for not seasoning my food, and then I actually ironically got kicked off, eliminated because it was too salty. But you know, there's a lesson there. Oh, God bless you. Again, you can, just like the smoothie, you can elevate that more if you want. If you wanted to add some of those seeds that we mentioned, any other sort of health promoting foods, it just does come down to accessibility and budget at the end of the day. So the take home message is, with the salad, prioritize protein, get an abundance of natural and unprocessed, but make that food the hero by dressing it and treating it with respect as you would a fillet steak. And the last dish is something that is very close to my heart in many ways, and it's a slow cooked dish, and it's how are we doing for time, first of all, Christoph?
We are 1:45, so yeah.
Oh yeah?
Got a 15, 20 minutes or so, yeah.
Okay, all right, beautiful. Very close to my heart. I grew up in pubs in and around London for 40 years. My dad had this thing for certain cuts of meat that perhaps, you know, they're sort of pigeonholed, unusual these days, but increasingly less so. So I grew up on the smell and the flavour of osso buco, beef cheeks, heart, liver, kidney, what else? Oxtail, all those sorts of things. And some of those things I didn't know what they were. Like, I couldn't work out what oxtail was. Like, I know what it sounds like, but surely that's not the thing that we're going to be eating. Anyway, fast forward to as a 45-year-old, this is something that I cook every week, no matter what the season is. You know, an animal has died, so let's acknowledge that and eat all the parts of it. And to be honest, like, it's the most nutrient-rich part of the animal. Yes, there's obviously nutritional merit and value to a steak. I'm not saying that, but look at all. So this is a bit of a medley. So we've got 3 cuts here. We've got osso buco. So that's the shank of the cow. We've got beef cheeks, and we've got oxtail. So I don't know how well you can see some of these cuts, but I'll just explain that there's so much connective tissue. If you think about a ribeye, it hasn't got much connective tissue. A little bit more sinew and fat with a rump, let's say, or a sirloin, but not to the extent that these cuts have. These are sort of riddled with collagen and gelatin and glucosamine, and so those are the sorts of things we take as supplements, many of us. However, they do require a different treatment when you're cooking them. You know, you can't cook that in three minutes on each side. It will just be a horrible experience. But you can set it in the oven and set and forget for 3 or 4 hours, and it becomes this wonderful experience. And I think it's actually somewhat easier to cook that way than cooking a chicken breast. It just requires a lot more time. So I've got about 5 minutes, and I'm just going to get the ball rolling on it, and I'll show you how easy it is. So we've got some olive oil in there. So this is a big casserole dish, if you like, or a crock pot or a Dutch oven. So I'm going to start it off up top on the stove top, and then I'm going to transplant it into the oven. So very, very, very simple. A couple of onions. And the thing about this type of cooking, I guess with all my recipes, all my attitude towards cooking is you don't have to follow, if the recipe says like a fine dice or a julienne or finely chopped, just chop an onion or a garlic the way that you want to chop an onion or a garlic. There's no rules. So that being said, or to that point I should say, I'm just going to quickly sort of quarter these a little bit, because over time this is going to be a slow cook recipe, so things do break down. So actually giving them a little bit of form, large form to start with, sort of translates after 3 or 4 hours into, you can still see what you're eating. I'm a massive fan of garlic, so I'm going to keep those whole. So there's probably about 8 cloves there. So I've got, let's say, 3 herbs. We've got basil, so it goes very well with beef. And because we're using a lot of meat here, there's going to be a lot of broth too, a lot of liquid. You can go quite generous with the herbs. It's going to be cooking for a long time, so you need the robustness or the quantity or the volume of the herbs that's going to stand that amount of cooking. Okay, so there's probably a good two tablespoons even herb de Provence. How do you say that, Christophe? Herbs de Provence. Okay, probably about 1 tablespoon there, and then about 3 or 4 bay leaves. So all this meat, for me, I find it more nutritious, more delicious, and it's cheaper. You buy a steak, maybe $40, $45 a kilo. This is more in the region of $20 a kilo. The oxtail, or maybe 25 for the ossobuco. But to me, that's a nice bonus, because I think it's more nutritious and more delicious. So look, if we had more time, I'd sort of fry those off a little bit longer. But I just want to dump the meat in. And if there's any blood, like there is in packets of meat often, throw that in as well. Don't discard that. And really, we're getting close to it being not finished, obviously. It's got to cook for 3 or 4 hours. But I'd brown that off, and then I'd add some red wine, and probably, half a bottle. Crank the temperature up of the stove top, so burn the alcohol off. The last thing you want to do is taste the alcohol at the end of the dish. But what you should be left with is the tones of the alcohol. You can use red wine, white wine, rosé, combination. I've done it with beers, dark beers, lager. There's no rules, or you don't have to do alcohol. You can just do broth, chicken broth, bone broth, veggie broth. What else can you do? As long as you're covering about 80% of the meat, so the liquid's going to come to there at least. Without liquid of some nature, it's not going to be a great experience. You need that in there. I won't pour it in yet because that'll sort of disrupt the nature of it. I will add some salt. Again, there's a lot of meat there, there's a lot of liquid, so you can be quite generous with salt. I did have some fresh rosemary from the garden, so I'll just stick a couple of sprigs in. You might want to put some anchovies in, you might want to put some Dijon mustard or seeded mustard. But basically it becomes a very simplistic dish without those things. We've just got onion and garlic olive oil, 1 cut, 2 cut, 3 cuts. I've got 3 cuts of the slow cooked meat. So it can be ossobuco, cheeks, shanks, it can be chuck, all those meats that require a longer cook, some herbs, and then some liquid. So today, once I sign off, I'll put probably about 400 mils of red wine, let that burn off, turn the temperature down, and then I'll add some tinned tomatoes. Enough tinned tomatoes, probably 800 mils, to get me up to about 80 or 90% of coverage of the meat. Bang it into the oven, probably really high on 250 for about 10 minutes. That gets the heat straight in there. So I'll preheat that, 250 or 220, something pretty high. Really inject a lot of heat straight into that casserole dish. Then after 10 minutes, knock it down to 140, and then don't come back to it for another 3 hours. Come back 3 hours, you might find that the ossobuco's ready, but the oxtail might need another half an hour. Just bang it in, nothing terrible is going to happen to the ossobuco. But you'll get to a point where the ossobuco, the oxtail and the cheeks are all tender. Heaven. And it'll last your family 2 or 3 days. So I'll turn that off. Let's just assume that I've cooked it and it tastes delicious and I'm about to enjoy it. But guys, I hope there was something in that. I know we sort of pushed for time now, but I hope there was something in that. And maybe it's the inclusion of more natural and unprocessed foods. Maybe it's framing your health and well-being through the lens of normalizing hormones in your physiology. Maybe it's making those vegetables and leafy greens more of the hero by including some seasonings, some lemon, some salt, some salsa, some mayonnaise, anything that really lifts it and gets you coming back for that, or those types of foods again and again and again. Maybe it was an introduction into other cuts of meat that are perhaps more nutritious or certainly more affordable for us. So hopefully there was something in there. Enjoy the rest of the week and all the I guess experiences that J&C are putting on for Women's Health Week. And again, thanks for listening and thanks for allowing me to be a part of it.
Beautiful work. Thank you, Scotty. That was honestly an awesome presentation there. Lots to take. We'll be trying a few of those myself. Folks, if you've got any questions, we've got a couple of minutes there available to answer. Otherwise, I will be shooting a poll there. Let's see. Actually, I'll get Dave to send that through because I can't do it on my end. Dave, if you could send that through, that would be awesome. Any feedback, please let us know. Yeah, hope you enjoyed it.
Can I butt in and ask you a question, please?
Sure.
Thanks. Scott, you know, so I was trying to get my head around from the beginning, and I should have asked you, when you were breaking down like the fat, protein and the carbs, with making a meal and looked at using 30% fat, so would it be like 70% all up protein, fat together, 70%, and then like 30% carbs, or?
It really depends on, I guess, two things: what your health goal is, what your starting point is, and your energetic output. So going back to, if you break down those, this is really simplistic, but if you break down those macronutrients into silos, the fat and the protein has a structural, functional role. Without hitting a certain threshold with either of those, cracks are going to appear in your health and well-being. The same principle doesn't apply to carbohydrates. So you and I can never, you know, I could not eat another carbohydrate for the rest of my days. Nothing substantial is going to happen to me. Our body relies on carbohydrates for a couple of little processes, some brain activity and some red cell formation. So we do need carbohydrates, but our body can synthesize that from the breakdown of protein. Mm-hmm. So it's really a sliding scale. So if you've got, you know, if you're playing hockey, basketball, doing high intensity workouts, CrossFit, things of that nature, then definitely you need carbs. You need to, you know, you need to refuel on that substrate. But if you're, you know, sedentary, you know, you might go for a walk every now and again, then you can dial that down. And obviously with that, you'd sort of reduce your overall calories for the day to match your output. So another way to frame it is when you're designing your plate is to think about those macronutrients, and you go about a palm, 1 to 2 palm size of protein, good quality protein if you can, about 2 to 3 fist-sized serves of above ground veggies, nutritious veggies, and then about 1 to 2 thumb-sized serves of healthy fats. So that can come in the form of a dressing, or cooking your food in olive oil or butter or tallow or ghee or lard, things of that nature. But that's, I guess, a very simplistic, crude way of designing it, but it kind of works. I hope that kind of answers your question.
Absolutely. Awesome.
Oh, okay, good.
Thank you.
Great. Any more questions there, folks, before we slowly wrap it up? I see a few little fingers there, little faces there, hesitation. I'm out, folks. We're here. Got the one and only Scott.
The one and only.
A chance. I'm just, that link didn't work, Scott, so what I'm doing now is I'm getting all these emails so I can forward your PDF cookbook individually to our members. And
yeah, great. Yeah. I will just say, and I'll leave off where I started, that it is a very, you know, life's difficult anyway. It's hard enough to prioritize our health over family, over work, over stress, friends and relationships. Layer on COVID and the restrictions that are placed upon us, it's a very tricky time. So my clinic door is, you know, open. So if I can help in the ways that I can help, which is nutrition, food, recipes, workouts, listening, helping to optimize sleep and well-being, then like we can jump on a call or video conference or chat over whatever platform you feel comfortable. But you know, it is a challenging time, and so if I can help, then I will.
Awesome. Much appreciated.
All right.
All right, folks. Thank you, Scotty.
Thank you, guys. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Well, and for the rest of us, I'll stay on for a couple of minutes if you've got any other questions or emails.